Hi and welcome back. This time we are doing something in our backend with our NestJS API. We will add a new feature module, so the real blog feature now, to our API. We will add there our blog entry entity and our blog entry interface, and also establish the ManyToOne relationship to our user, and there we will add our OneToMany relationship to our blog entries, so we make it bidirectional. And as always, we will start with looking at our video outcome, then we will write a user story or read the user story for this, and then we will implement the user story and close it at the end and merge it back to our develop branch. So the video outcome is a bit short this time because we have just added our blog entry entity, our blog entry interface, and we have implemented the ManyToOne and OneToMany relationship and added our blog module. So we also explained a lot what is ManyToOne and what does this. Let's have a quick look at our story for video 19. Here we have the description at blog entry models, and the story is, as a technical lead, I want that we have a new module blog in our API where we have our models for blog entries, so we can build the controller and service in the next videos. The acceptance criteria are: we want to have a new module blog, we want to have our blog entity and the blog interface with a ManyToOne relationship to our user. And we want to add, of course, the one-to-many relationship, so it's bidirectional to our user entity. So now we can move this to doing and go into our code. And here you see we are on branch develop, and we can now go with git-flow feature start to our new branch video or feature video 19. This is new created from develop, and so we can start now. The first thing that we can do is we can use the nest CLI to generate a new module, because right now you can see we have just our auth and our user module, and we now need also a new module to handle everything that has to do with our blog entity or our blog scope. So we can say nest generate module, and then we are just calling this module blog. And then you will see that I generated it in the wrong folder. So we delete this and we go into our API folder, and then we run the same command again. So we do it now in our backend folder here, and it should appear here beneath user or above it. So you see now here we have our blog module, which contains at the moment nothing. And so here is where we can add more stuff, so imports and controllers and providers and everything that we need. So, but right now we are just interested in having or in making our entities. So for this we can make a new folder in our blog module. We can just name it, for example, models. Or we can name it model, and then we make one new file that we can call blogEntry.entity.ts. And here we have our, because if we just call it blog, then it's like having the whole thing will be a block here with different entries, and so I would name it something like blog entry or article or something like this, so you can refer to a single type of this. So what we do here now is we export a class just like we did in our user entity from our user module, so that we call blog entry entity, and we can annotate it with add entity from NestJS. You can see it here from TypeOrm. And we could, for example, change the name, and we can just name it blog entry. And then we need all the stuff that we need. So at first it will have an ID. The ID is a primarily generated column. Then we are having a title, which is just a string. This is also a column. So we have to import this. Then we have a slug. This is also from type string. It's also a column. And here we can slug article. So what is a slug? A slug is something, or for example, the name in the URL here of an article that is easy readable by a human and also good for SEO for advertising. So we can read it here. What is a slug? It's a part of a URL which identifies a particular page on a website in an easy to read form. In other words, it's a part of the URL that explains the page's content. For this article, it's just the slug here, you can see it here. And the slug is simply slug because it's about this. So we need to store this to have later like a human readable and good format for SEO. And so the next thing could be something like a description, which is just a string, and we can also annotate it with column. And we can say it's empty by default if there is no value provided, because often we don't have this value. Then we have the body, so what we is our text from our article. And this can also be that this thing has a different state. For example, it's in a state where it's not published or anything, so it could be empty. So we set it default to empty. And what we do here is later, if we implement this also in the front end, then we will not just store plain text, but we could also store it with HTML text for a header or an image or whatever, or we could also do something in Markdown and just save it all to the database in the body. Then the next thing could be like created, so we want to have a date when this got created. So we can name this column, and here we can give it a type, and for example this could be a timestamp, and we can make a default and just go for current timestamp. And we can just copy this and go here for updated, so that we always know when was the last time something was updated or done. Then we can do something with before update. This will always run if you update a data set here. And so we say we want to always to update the timestamp. And this updated will be our new date. Then we have some other properties, like what we could do is we could show like a number of people who liked this article or this blog entry. And we could also say this is a column. And we could say the default value is of course null, because at the beginning no one can like it if it's not published. Then we have like a header image or a link to a header image, which is just a string. So this is relatable to the string of the profile image from our user entity, where we just store the link where our image is laying from for this article or for this entry. So this is also a column. Then we have like we could make, or we could go for published date. For example, if you say we want that if I write a new blog entry, then I could say you always have a different state. For example, you can have a draft state, so it's not published, or a published state. And so you could say I will add a publish date here, so I don't have to manually click in the second that I want to release this blog article, this button, but I can also just say I enter the publish date for in 1 week now, and then it gets published in 1 week. So we could do this later, and we could also say if you want to have like like a supervisor who's doing all this. So for example, if you have one administrator later and very many writers who are writing articles, and then the administrator would have to check if this article is right and could be published, and then he could set it to this boolean value is published to true, and then it gets published. So these are all things that we can implement, so we can later implement some stuff very easy. And then we have like the main stuff that we need, and that is we want to refer with every single block entry should refer to a user. So if I'm logged in with my username or with my user, then and I write a block entry, then I want that I am the author of this block entry, and that if someone goes to my profile, then there should be a list of all my block entries that I wrote and that I published. So what we need here the user entity. And what we want to do is we want to have many-to-one relationship, because we here have many-to-one, because I am one author and I can have many blog articles or many blog entries that I can write. So I am always just one user and I can have as many blog articles as I can write. So we can just look into this from TypeOrm. So this is the page here, many-to-one, one-to-many relationships. And this is a relation where A contains multiple instances of B, but B contains only one instance of A. So we would have here one user has many instances of block entries, but one block entry refers only to one user. So when we have user and photos, it's like user and block entries. A user can have multiple photos, or a user can have multiple block entries, but each photo or block entry is only owned by one single user. So it's like the same stuff that we have. So you can see here with many-to-one in our photo, or let's say block entry, we refer to the type user entity here. And then we write this into the user.photos. So we need there a new value in our code. And then we have on the other side in our user our one-to-many relationship. So it's bidirectional, where we refer to photo, or in other ways in our code to block entries, and then we refer there to the user, so here. And so you can see when we added this here, you will end with this table here. So we have our block entry table here, we have an ID, we have an URL, and then we have stored here the user ID, so it's a foreign key to this table. And here we just have our normal values. And so later we could also work, or we can work with relations. So we can, if we get all the users, we can, for example, also in our SQL ask for the relation photo or block entry, and then we also get inside our values here the block or block entries or photos sent with us. I will show you this in the next video. So right now we just want to implement it, for example, like we did here. So we have many-to-one. This is from the type user entity. Here we have to be careful, because if I just go for user, this means it's our user interface. So we have to go for our user entity, and then we can call it whatever we like. For example, the user, and then we go for, we could name this in our user's block entries. And now he says this is missing in our type user entity, so we have to add this. So we can just copy this and go into our user module and go here to our model, and then we can just add this value here to our model. So we can say here we have the block entries, This is of the type blogEntry.entity, and this is an array, because one user can have many block entry entities or many block entries, because I can always write, for example, I can write a block entry every day. And so I could in a year make 365, and 2 years more and more and more. And so this is the other side of the relationship. It's one-to-many. We have again the type. This is the block entry entity. And then we can name it like we want, but we can go with the same name, block entry entity. And then we want to go for block entry entity dot author. So this is like the name, we refer to this, but we named it here, so the author who wrote it. So the next thing that we need to do is we now can prepare our interface. So we can add here a new file, blogEntry.interface.ts, and we can just say export interface and name it blogEntry, and then we can say ID from type number, title from type string, slug from type string, description from type string. We have a body, also string. Probably I can copy this. We have a created add from type date. We have a updated add from date, name it add. Then we have our likes, which is a number. We have our author, and here we refer to the user interface. Then we have our header image, which is also just a string. We have our published date, which is also a date, and we have our boolean value if our entry is published. So we can now save this, and now we have to add the same in our interface for our user. And we can just say these are our block entries, and there we refer to our block entry, and it's of course an array list. So this would be all for this video, and now we can just try if we can start this and see if it's compiling. And what we can do, of course, here is we can add our TypeOrm module. So what does it say? Here, unable to connect. Yeah, because now we are looking in our user interface for this entity, but we can't find it because we have not added it here. So we need to add this for feature, because we are in our feature module, and here we want to add our blogEntry entity. Then we can also import our auth module for later and our user module, so we can use this in the next videos. And now we can see everything is done right. So you see it's starting correctly, and we can just go into our database. We can reload, and then we see that we have our block entry. So this is exactly named. You can see it here. There's like a difference what I did before in our entity, like we did annotated here. And you can see in our user entity I didn't do this, and then it just names it like this, I think. Yeah, you see, you could, for example, also name it completely different. And so if we now query all our block entries, there shouldn't be anything, because we haven't ended a row or values. So we can now save all these things. So we can say git add -upper-A. We can make a commit message. And this is video 19. And we can say added blog module and blog entry. Let's be here, entry entity and blogEntry.interface, as well as the ManyToOne relationship to the user. So we push it, and as always I have to set the upstream branch. And now we can go through our story if we have done everything that we need. So we see we have added a new module block. We have our blog entity and the blog interface, as well as our many-to-one relationship and one-to-many. And so this is all done, and we can move this into our next swim lane here. So what we can do now is we can just call git-flow feature finish and finish this feature up, and we'll merge it back into our develop branch, which we will see now here. And then we can push our develop branch. You see we now merged our video, our feature into our develop branch, and switched to now branch develop and pushed everything to our remote repository on GitLab.